Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. A warm welcome to today's Q&A session, where we tackle the topic of the executive assistant as a strategic business partner. This is our third installment in the Pitman Perspective series, where we look to bring in seasoned experts within different fields affecting business to try and debunk and give us clarity on topics that are shaping business trends in the real world. So, for those of you who are joining us maybe perhaps for the first time, I'd just like to give you a very quick introduction to who Pitman Training are. So we're one of the world's leading business skills training providers with over 10,000 students that we train globally across different aspects of business functions. Particularly, we're very passionate about the administrative profession. And today we're absolutely delighted to have a world-leading authority join us for this particular session, where we look to understand how the executive assistant can develop and evolve into that strategic business partner. Without introductions, I guess Lucy is well known to many of you within the profession, but for those of you who are not aware of Lucy, she is one of the world's leading authorities within the profession, who has dedicated 30 years of her life to driving the profession as a career, and having spoken to multiple companies, both MDs and executives on the one side, but also executive assistants and the administrative profession on the other, to try and marry that approach of creating that career and career advancement for the profession. She's CEO of March & Publishing, and also runs Executive Secretary magazine under that publishing group, which provides thought leadership content on the profession, in addition to be a prolific trainer and speaker globally. And we're very, very excited to have her join us today. So Lucy, a very, very Kenyan welcome to you. Karibu sana, as we say here. And I know you've been to Kenya before, but maybe a visit is due at some stage, I'm sure. So Lucy, very, very warm welcome to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Shaquille. It's such a pleasure to be here. And really, Kenya holds such a dear place in my heart. I was meant to go there when I was 18 to go and spend a year teaching English, and it never happened. And it took me 30 years to get there, but I did eventually, and it was every bit as beautiful and wonderful as I thought it would be. So, hello.
Well, definitely. We'll look forward to welcoming you here, definitely in the near future. But just before we kick off, Lucy, onto the Q&A, which first of all, to the attendees, thank you so much for sending through so many fantastic questions. So what we have done is group them together into relevant buckets, and we've got a series of 10 questions that we'll go through with Lucy, which should take around 40 minutes, after which we'll also open up to Q&A with you guys as well, where you can ask Lucy any questions you may have. So feel free to drop in any questions that you may want in the Q&A section, and likewise, we will aim to address those as we go through. If there's any questions or clarity that you might have as we're going through the discussion, again, feel free to drop those in the Q&A, and we'll be moderating those and making sure we are able to clarify any points that may need more clarification. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and without further ado, Lucy, let's delve into some of those fantastic questions we've received.
Wonderful. Good. Let's start at the beginning.
Let's start at the beginning, exactly. So we received a fantastic question, which I thought would be a great starting point. And given your career aspirations of making this profession, a prolific profession that generates strong career advancement and of course, career satisfaction. Question we've got asked, particularly for someone who's probably at the lower echelons and starting out in the profession, is this a solid profession?
Oh my word, yes. Yes is the easy answer, but let me go into that in more detail. I think a lot of the people who are in the profession are seeing headlines all over the world saying that this is a disappearing profession, and that it's going to get taken over by artificial intelligence. And in fact, on the Future of Jobs report from the World Economic Forum, it's listed as number 3 on the roles that are most likely to disappear. But that's all a bit smoke and mirrors, really, and they haven't done their research properly. And what is based on is the role of an assistant at a junior level. And the reason those stats come out that way is because in the States, the Bureau of Labor only has one category for assistants, and that is the lower level ones. If you start looking at the titles that are more akin to executive assistants, and obviously there's a huge difference between the two roles, then it's growing at a faster rate than almost any other job there. And in fact, Glassdoor is saying that it's one of the jobs that you really should be looking to get into, an executive assistant. So here is the difference, Shaquille. At a lower level, the assistants are reactive and they're doing tasks and they're waiting to be told what to do. And those guys will go, because if you can do things twice in exactly the same way, then it can be automated. So yes, AI eventually is going to take over those roles. And so if that's what you're doing and you're just waiting to be told to do stuff, and it's all very repetitive and task-based, you need to start stepping up and getting strategic and working out how you can better support your executive. So how can you add value, yes, to what you're doing? The EAs, on the other hand, at the higher level, are not reactive at all. They're proactive. It's all about leadership and communication and collaboration and managing projects and really driving the agenda and making sure that your executive is absolutely the best that they can possibly be. And at that level, that isn't going anywhere, because especially with COVID, the leaders need to be smarter and faster and more efficient than ever before. And what an assistant does at that level is to give them back their time so that they're able to focus on saving the world instead of the minutiae, which takes up so much of their really valuable time.
Oh, no, I'd absolutely agree with that. I think as an executive myself, I'm looking for someone to give me back that time. There's so much bigger picture items that I personally need to look at. So developing that role, essentially, you're saying is moving towards that strategic element, and sort of technology needs to be embraced that allows people to then step up into those more strategic roles versus the more repetitive task-based roles that at the moment that are happening.
Exactly.
So on that point, actually, let's talk about career paths, because we got a lot of questions based on this, because I think there's a lot of confusion on career paths at the moment. Different job titles are being bunged around, and also the different types of education you might need to excel both in the present and the future outlooks that you spoke about just now. So could you highlight maybe where you see the lines blurring, where you see the distinction developing to bring clarity on career advancement prospects?
Oh, yes. And yes, there is an enormous amount of confusion. But if I tell you that so far in our research, we found 162 job titles for assistants, then it's not surprising, really, is it, that there is confusion. So, you know, it's... If even we actually started 6 years ago to do a piece of research via the World Administrators Summit, which some of you will be familiar with, but some of you won't. So let me tell you what that is. World Administrators Summit and World Administrators Alliance is the equivalent of the G8 for assistants. And it is the leaders of the associations from all over the world who come together every 3 years to talk about the things that are most important to the profession. And in fact, they just had their latest meeting. It was meant to be in Wellington, but obviously they had to postpone that because of COVID, so we had a business meeting. But the heads of 29 countries turned up to that meeting. And top of the list is career progression and how we try and put something into place that allows assistants wherever they are in the world to understand how they go from one level to another. Because when we started doing that research, what became clear very quickly is that we weren't going to be able to, A, look at what you call roles, because it's so different across the world. For example, in the UK, you would look at PAs and EAs primarily, with PAs being the lower level. And even then, you might have a PA who's working on reception or a PA who's looking after a CEO. So that's confusing in its own. In the States, a PA is somebody who looks after someone of high net worth or a celebrity. And so it's something totally different. And they tend to call their junior levels administrative assistants. Administrative assistants or EAs. But in Europe, it's more likely to be a management assistant. And in Australia, New Zealand, an EA is a junior level to a PA. So you can see just from looking at that, how confusing the whole thing gets. So what we've done at World Administrators Summit, and we're so close to releasing it, I'm really excited, is to look at 5 levels for the assistant, with level 1 being entry level, and level 5 being more of a really senior EA or a chief of staff level, chief of staff being a brand new position. And that's a whole different discussion, because chiefs of staff aren't being used properly either. They're being seen as being a promotion to EA, and it's actually a totally different role. And that's causing confusion, just like everything else. But the idea is that rather than giving job titles, we literally just call it level 1, level 2, level 3, up to 5, and we put the skill sets underneath each level that we think that an assistant at that level should have. And it does various things, which is really exciting to me. Firstly, it means that anybody that comes into the profession at a level 1 can see that there is career progression and it is a career, it's not just a job. Because in businesses, there's still a confusion about that. B, it means that if you're looking to do training, you're going to be able to say, well, that's training to get me from a level 2 to a level 3, so that's the correct one for me. B, if you're anywhere in the world and you're wanting to move job, you should be able to apply for a job that's at your right level. So whether you're in Kenya and you want to move to London, or whether you are in Australia and you want to move to Singapore, everybody should understand what a level 4 assistant is. And finally, and almost the most excitingly, we found that the executives didn't really understand what they needed to hire. And so this brings clarity to that and allows for them to look and go, what do I need? That's what I need. And then they're hiring at the right level and at the right remuneration. So let's bring clarity and professionalize it. I think this is the very first step. And it's a bit like accountancy. You know, everybody understands the different levels of accountancy and taking exams to get from one level to another. And we're hoping to do exactly the same for assistants.
Is there a time frame on that in terms of when that could be externalized and people can start adapting to that new hierarchy?
I have the first draft. The next meeting of the World Administrators Summit is scheduled for May next year. But we hope to have it before then in order to send it out for people to say, this is right, or actually we think that bit should shift around or whatever. So it's really close. And as I say, it's taken 6 years to get there, but I'm so excited to get that released because I think it will change everything.
I mean, that would be a fantastic milestone. So in principle, the 5 levels and the remunerations and the skill sets mapping, that sort of plan will remain. I think at the moment you're just saying it's just a matter of kind of crossing the I's and dotting the I's and crossing the T's, but that structure would remain and should be the one that's moving into the profession in the future.
Absolutely, totally. But the other thing is, Shaquille, that it's a living, breathing document. So as assistants change what they're doing, and we know that when we upskill assistants at the highest level, it adds enormous amounts to the productivity. So for example, there was a group of assistants that I trained in London last year who we pulled in the heads of finance and marketing and procurement or whatever to teach them properly in sales what each department did. And those assistants went back to their executives and started putting into place things like briefing documents and history when they were going to go and see sales contacts, and were doing far more planning and projects than ever before. And the productivity of the teams that they were supporting went up by 28%. So actually, if we get this right, it's going to be amazing.
Fantastic. And another fundamental question before we get into that strategic element was around, and you'll love this question, Lucy, it's about demonstrating value. So we got a lot of questions about relevance and demonstrating value as a key concern for many within the profession, especially now, given the heightened impact of COVID-19, as organizations are looking more at tech, as you mentioned, definitely at the lower echelons of the profession, and also more leaner operations that they're trying to manage to impact their bottom line. So if I was an administrative assistant looking to progress in this career and hopefully up those 5 kind of tiers that will come in, or an MD looking to bring in executive, how do you quantify this whole value conversation? And interestingly, to enter that, someone asked me, okay, so how do we actually negotiate that salary rise then after?
Oh, I love this question. I'm going to just start by saying that within COVID, what I'm finding is that the assistants are falling into 2 camps, actually. And the first is that they are either saying to me, I have so much to do, I have no clue how I'm going to get through it. And that tends to be because, just like the last recession 10 years ago, which is the only thing you can really compare this to, People are being let go, and then they're going to the assistant and saying, oh, you know how lovely you are, could you just take this on for a very short period of time? And I just remind you all that 10 years on, there's nothing more permanent than temporary, and you're still doing most of that stuff. So if you're taking on lots of stuff now with no training and no more remuneration, make sure that after we're through this, you are then negotiating, okay? And I'll come on to show how you prove that value in a moment. The second group of you are the ones who are sitting there and going, I have no clue what I'm meant to do. I'm totally off their radar. I'm really scared that they're going to let me go because they can't see what it is that I'm doing. Listen to me. This is the first time they have ever been through this too. And they need to be out there saving the world. And they're trying to reinvent the wheel as we move forward also. And so when you come to them and you go, what do you not want me to do? They go, whatever it is we pay you to do. Because they don't have time to think about what you're meant to be doing. They only have time to think about what they're trying to achieve. So you need to start putting in place the things that you can do that are really going to add value to this situation. And that is mainly taming chaos, because that's what you're amazing at. It's the process and the procedure. And I know that Matthew, my assistant, when I say I've had an amazing idea, he gets absolutely pale because he knows that he's going to be the one who has to put the process and procedure in place to do it. So get on, find the things you can do, because at the moment there's so much new process and procedure that needs to be put in place, and find the things that you're going to be able to do to give them back their time so that they can get on with saving the world. That's the first bit. The second thing that I would say to you is, you're forever saying to me, oh, Lucy, I'd love to ask for that, but you know, I don't really add anything to the bottom line. And it's the people that do that that get this stuff. What total and utter nonsense. Let's do the math and let's quantify exactly how much you're worth. So let's have a think for a moment about how much your executive earns. Yes? Should we say a lot? I think that's a good figure. Yes? And Definitely. Now about, as a percentage of their time, how much time you save them with what you do. I think even the worst of you would probably save them maybe 30% of their time, and the best of you would give them back 80, 90% of their time. So times their salary by the number of hours or by the percentage of time that you save them. And that is what you add to the bottom line. And that is before they use that time that you have saved them to go out and close business deals or come up with new revenue streams or have meetings with people that are going to be of use later on. And any revenue that's generated from all that is also what you contribute to the bottom line. And then that's before you do your day job. And I know that all of you are saving money when we're outside COVID on travel and on rooms at hotels and on meeting rooms and stationery and all that stuff, because most of you are absolutely passionate about making sure the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and that actually the company is getting things for the best value. So please don't ever tell me anymore that you don't contribute to the bottom line. And if you want to work out what salary rise you should be getting, then actually all you need to do is to do those sums and then say, this is what I contribute to the bottom line, and therefore I think that this is the salary that I should be on. But I think it also depends what level you're at. And I would be going away. I know, for example, when I was doing a presentation earlier on this week for APC, which is the biggest conference in the world for assistants, it was a presentation on chief of staff, and somebody said to me, well, actually, what you are saying about chief of staff, I am probably doing 80% of the things that you've just listed, and yet they're still paying me an EA salary, because a chief of staff will earn almost double what an EA will. I said, well, of course, because until you bring it to their attention, they're not going to do anything about it, are they? And so I suggested that she went and found a job description or took my presentation and went and said, without putting a headline on it, here are the things that I'm doing, would you agree? And when they say yes, reveal the title and say, well, there you are, that's what I am. And actually, this is the remuneration that's worth. And if you're not sure what remuneration you should be earning in the position that you're in, go to Glassdoor, because if you put in salary for an EA in Kenya, average salary for an EA in Kenya, will tell you.
Well, I think that's as powerful as it can get, because it takes away the whole need of which role am I in ultimately, and how does my sort of delivery or my output affect the bottom line, but actually it's just quantifying it based on time. And ultimately, as an executive myself, I know if I could get 50% of my time, would I pay someone else to be able to pick up those jobs which I find myself getting bogged down in? Absolutely.
So I think a really good example of that, actually, Shaquille, because I think it really helps to retain the information in their heads. There is a really great billionaire, actually, he's worth about 58 billion. It's the guy who started Priceline.com and Booking.com, and his name is Jeff Hoffman. And he quite often speaks to assistants at conferences, mainly because his assistant was killed in a car crash, so he does it to honor her. But he tells this story about going to dinner with a very good friend of his who was an eminent heart surgeon. And when he got there, this guy was doing his calendar. And he said to him, "Carl, what are you doing?" And Carl said, "Well, I'm doing my calendar." And he said, "But aren't you worth $500 an hour?" Now, Jeff says if you don't have an assistant, you are an assistant. And in effect, Carl was paying his assistant $500 an hour to do his calendar. It's really, really not best use of time. You know, if you can pay somebody $10, $20 an hour to do your calendar for you, which frees you up to go and make the $500 an hour, surely that's better.
Makes sense. Very, very, very powerful. And I like that phrase. If you don't have an assistant, you know, you are an assistant. So that's quite a powerful message for a lot of executives who I know at this moment in this webinar are indeed looking for an executive for the first time. So in terms of being able to quantify that as a business case to your seniors as well, or to your board, I think just do the math, and I think the logic does apply quite clearly.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about sort of the role of the assistant and the hierarchies and how that evolution is happening. We talked about the different career paths that people can take in this profession, being a very, very solid one as it develops further up. And we talked about, demonstrating that value. Now, as we move into the whole strategic element, we got a really cool question, I think, which is, okay, fine, you're talking about, you're talking about strategy. What does strategic actually mean? What does it mean to be strategic? And if it's a buzzword that's being used in industry at the moment, but how do you put that in the context of an assistant-executive relationship, and how does one actually become it?
All right, that's a lot of questions all in one question.
There's a lot of, maybe let's start it. What does strategic actually mean, and how do I become strategic at a high level?
My thought is that firstly, you need to understand your business. Okay, and there's a great deal of difference, by the way, from knowing about your business and really understanding it. And when I do my 2-day training course, I say to them, because I have a whole session on business strategy, how much do you know about your business? And most of them go, I know loads about my business. And when we start talking about it, it very quickly becomes clear that they don't. So for me, I would be looking constantly at how you save them time. You need to stop thinking about yourself as a gatekeeper of people and start thinking about being a gatekeeper of time, and working out what your executives should be doing. Okay, so you are managing them. Please remember, you are the expert at being the assistant, they are not. So if you understand your business, have you ever asked your executive what success looks like for them this year or this week or this month? Because if you don't know what that is, how can you possibly support them to get them there? Do you know what your executives' goals that have been set by the business this year are? Do you know what their KPIs, their key performance indicators are? Because if you don't, how can you possibly help to get them to what the business requires them to do? And if I was to say to you, what is your company's mission statement? Would you know? Do you know, if I was to say to you, write a list of 10 words on the board that the business stands for in terms of brand? Would you be able to do that? Do you know what new launches are coming this year? Do you know how much money you made last year? To me, Matt comes and sits in all my leadership meetings, because what it means is that, and not, by the way, to take the minutes, because you can't listen in the same way if you're there to take the minutes. But what it means is he knows what's coming up in the business. It means he can see what I have agreed to, so he can manage me through that process. He can see what everybody else has agreed to, so that he can chase them on my behalf. And it means that he is a true strategic business partner, because I am busy over here doing the things that I am amazing at, and he is busy over here doing the things that he is amazing at. There is a psychometric testing system called Belbin that I refer to quite a lot. And if you're not familiar with it, it's basically a system that Meredith Belbin developed that said, there are 8 different types of person in a perfect team. And it's very interesting when you do this with assistants, because they fall into 3 categories and the executive falls into 3 totally different categories usually. So your executives are going to be either plants, which means that they're really cranial and really great at coming up with new products or ways of doing things, but they're not usually terribly good at communicating. You know, those people you should probably sit in a high tower and let them hand down ideas to you because the communication skills aren't there. Or they're resource investigators. So they're the kind of people who are charging off down the corridor, driving things forward. Everybody's excited to work with them, but they can't complete or finish anything if their life depends on it. Or they are shapers, and shapers are the ones who are be quick, be fast, be done. I haven't got time for this. We're going to do it my way or the highway. Again, communication problems. And then your assistants fall into team worker. Team worker being the ones that smooth things out, make sure everybody's happy, keep everything communicated properly. Or they're completer finishers, so dotting the I's and crossing the T's and not wanting to delegate because they want everything to be perfect. Or they are implementers, which does exactly what it says on the tin, which means that they are taking things and making sure that the process and procedure is in place to make it happen. So can you see you've got your executives world over there, you've got the assistants world over there, and actually, when you get it right, they meet in the middle. It's magic. One of you breathes in, the other one breathes out, and it's like one whole, complete, perfect business person. And that is why the business hires an assistant, because they want the executive to have all that nonsense taken away from them so that they can get on with doing the great things that they're capable of. I think it's really important that you remember that you're not hired by your executive, you're hired by the business. The business employs you, and they employ you to perform that role. So if you have an executive who will not allow you to do what you are meant to be doing, I think you have a duty to train them how to do it, because that is why the business is paying you your money, to make sure that they're able to operate at warp speed and get on with the things that the business pays them to do.
That's a very powerful analogy in terms of creating that holistic business person. So the strategic element almost is like that, to operate at the higher level is almost a marriage of sorts, where you need to find the right compatible partner. So you breathe in, they breathe out. And that's where strategy really comes into play. But that person has to be elevated and thinking at the same rhythm as an executive, and thinking bigger picture, and taking a lot of that information, being able to absorb that to then implement it, depending on the type of character that they are. Fascinating stuff. Right, so let's, talking about difficult bosses, actually, we got a lot of questions on this, and not being able to communicate well with their executives or influence them towards a better working relationship. So let's talk about building that powerful business relationship. I know in many cases, executives will never have had any training in managing their assistants. So is it down to the assistant to train their executives? And if so, how do they go about doing that?
Yes, it is down to the assistant to train their executives. And you would be so surprised, you know, at the number of executives who have no clue how to use their assistants. It's very interesting. When I go and talk in companies, very often the head of HR will come and stand at the back and listen. And after the presentation, they'll grab me and they'll go, "Oh my gosh, I never realized you could use an assistant like that. Will you come and talk at our company conference? Because we'd like you to train the executives how to use their assistants properly. But we're going to give you a weird title so that they don't know what you're training on, because otherwise they won't come and listen, because they don't understand that they need training on this." And they usually put me just after lunch, you know, in that slot which is always a bit kooky. So, and then afterwards, the executives come and say to me, "That's just amazing. I'd never thought I could use my assistant that way." Here is how I think you go and have that conversation. By the way, can I just tell you, the latest stat says that the average age that somebody gets management training is 46. That's a whole heap of managers wandering around with no clue what they're doing. So what I would say is that...
Is that a global stat?
That's a global stat, yes.
Okay.
So what I would say is the way to start to train your manager is to blame me, okay? So when you go back to your business tomorrow or this afternoon, you say, "I just watched this webinar, and this woman," that's me, "this woman reminded me that my job is to make you absolutely the best that you can be, and I have some ideas around that. I'd like to sit down and I would like to talk to you about it." Now, the secret of this is to plan in advance, because you know what will happen. They'll go, come to my office, and it'll all go out of your head, and you won't remember any of the things that you want to do, okay? So what I would suggest is that you go back to your offices and you think of 3 things that you would like to do differently or that you would like to take on. And some of them might be big, some of them might be small, but they all have to be smart. So you want them to be specific and measurable and achievable and realistic and time-bound, okay? Don't do any more than 3 initially, because if you do more than 3, you're going to confuse them and you're going to confuse yourself. You both want to be able to keep track of it. But if you take those 3 things and you do them immaculately, then they'll trust you and they'll allow you to take on more stuff. So it might be that you want to take over looking after their emails, for example. And with email, and I'm on a real bandwagon with email, because so many executives don't allow their assistants access to their email. And they say, no, I want to have control over it. I don't want you deleting stuff all over the place. And anyway, a lot of it is private. Well, maybe set up a separate email for things that really are private. But you know what? The average executive spends 58% of their time on email. So that's 58% of their salary that the business is paying for them to manage their own email. Whereas we have a triage system, which I'll send to you, Shaquille, actually, so you can get it out to the attendees. But we have an email triage system, which takes that down to 12% of their time. And nothing ever gets deleted, so they still have the power to look at absolutely everything. But executives should not be managing their own email. And nor, by the way, should they be managing their own calendars. Matt and I have an amazing system with that, whereby if somebody writes to me and says that they want to have a meeting with me, I write back to them and I'm totally on brand. And I say, I would love to meet with you. Of course, I would love to meet with you, but I'm copying in Matthew because he will kill me if I start playing with my calendar because he has so much stuff penciled in. And I copy in Matt, and underneath the signature, when nobody looks, I put a number between 1 and 5. Now, if it's a 1, you'll get a meeting with me pretty much immediately. If it's a 5, it will be a cold day in hell before you get a meeting with me. And then after that, I put a comma and I put a number, which is 15, 30, 45, or 1, so that he knows how long I want that meeting to be. Now, just think for a moment. I know on a one-off, that only saves probably a few minutes of my time. But actually, over the course of a year, him not having to come and say, how long do you want that meeting for? How important is it? Do you really want to speak to them? When do you want to speak to them? What is it all about? It saves all of that, and he gets on and he does all that for me. It will save hours and hours and hours of time over the course of a year. And that's what you want to be thinking about, that time stuff.
Fantastic. And you mentioned that in terms of talking to the to your assistant, that those 10 minutes a day that you spend with them, just prioritizing, again, helps build that relationship that you want, because they begin to understand you on a regular basis, how you think, how you're feeling, where your priorities sit. Is that something that you recommend a lot of people to use, or how much time do you expect an executive and assistant to actually spend with each other?
Well, I mean, Matt and I talk all the time. And if it's really, we haven't worked in the same building together for nearly 9 years, you know, and so he comes and has lunch with me occasionally. But on the whole, we work totally separately. So if it's something really important he needs from me, he'll WhatsApp me. That's the agreement that we have. But wherever I am in the world, we meet for 10 minutes a day. Now, some of you won't have meetings with your bosses at all. Some will do once a month and some will do once a week. But if it's once a week or once a month, what tends to happen is you book in a block of time and then it gets shifted because somebody else needs that time, and either you take yourself off the calendar or they do. And so that's really painful because you're storing up loads of stuff that you want answers on and you can't get them immediately. Whereas with Matt and I, we meet every morning for 10 minutes, partly because actually I am a mixture between the be quick, be fast, be done boss and the wow, everything's so amazing, dependent on what kind of day I'm having. So for me, the idea of doing a 2-hour meeting going through detail is, I would rather poke pins in my eyes. So, you know, to do 10 minutes a day, they'll come in, we actually cover a lot in those meetings, you know. We'll look at things that have come in on email that he doesn't understand, that he wants to know. We'll look at travel plans when we're not in COVID. We'll look at the projects he's working on and what the updates are since yesterday. We'll look at things that are departmental issues since yesterday. I mean, there's about 8 or 9 things that we cover on a daily basis, but because it's only an update from yesterday, it only takes 10 minutes. And then he can go away and he can get on with doing his job because he knows what the priorities are. And the priorities in any business change every single day. They're really important, because I think that where it goes wrong between executives and assistants is where the communication piece isn't in place. And it's always, always about that communication. You've got to open up those channels. So if you're not getting an executive that's communicating with you, you really, really need to try and make that work. Go ask them lots of questions, you know, like the one I said earlier about what does success look like for you, or, you know, how do you best like to be communicated with, or who are the people that I ought to put through absolutely immediately if they call, or can you tell me a bit about what the business strategy is now for the next quarter, you know, whilst we're in COVID, or I don't know, I have a whole list of those. That's another thing I can probably send you, Shaquille, to get out there. But ask pertinent questions that maybe they've never been asked before so that you can get one step ahead.
Whereas I'll hold you to that. So I think those pertinent questions I've noted down. So we'll get those. We'll definitely get those out, including your triage system. I think that'll be really helpful. Thank you. We had a lot of questions about assistants managing multiple executives and stakeholders. So not just at the executive level, but also having to deal with people further down the organization. And we found a lot of them saying, well, you know, either we just don't know how to kind of stay on top of things. So how does what are maybe your top tips for harnessing those high levels of efficiency when dealing with such multiple stakeholders and partners as well?
Let's firstly say that actually it's only 1 in 5 assistants now that's only managing one person, and the average number is 4. So I think because when you see on the films assistants, they're always only looking after one person, there is this myth that that's how it works, and actually it isn't anymore. That isn't how it works anymore. If you're managing multiple executives, it's fine unless they don't get on and they are trying to play politics with each other as to who is the most powerful. And if that's the case, I would send them off into a room, a bit like warring parents, and get them to sort it out, because it isn't down to you to try and juggle what the priorities are. They need to work that out between them. But the other thing that I would say, and it really works, is that we've taken on a system called time boxing, which is, there's a great article on it actually in the Harvard Business Review if you go and look it up. But what it basically means is that I have a calendar and so does Matt. And into that, I have a to-do list, but I hate it because you know how soul destroying it is. It's like, I never get to the end of this thing. And at the end of every day, you're looking at an ever-growing list of things you've got to do. So with time boxing, what you do is you go into your calendar and you work out what things on your to-do list you absolutely have to do today. And you block in the time to do them. So that by the end of the day, you're looking and you're going, yes, I've really achieved that stuff. Well, so Matt does that for his calendar as well. And that's shared with me and all the other members of our team, because he doesn't just support me, he supports several other members of the team as well. And we are all therefore able to see where he has gaps or where he doesn't have gaps. And you know what, I'm not a nasty person. I will keep saying to him though, Matt, this is really urgent. Could you possibly do this? And Matt, this is also really urgent. Could you do, and this is urgent. Can you just, but I assume because he's an adult that he will push back if it's too much. And he will say, Lucy, which of these things is urgent, 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 because I am overwhelmed. At which point I go, okay, no problem. Or sometimes I'll say to him, right, I really need you to do this. And he goes, where? And shows me the calendar, you know, and he doesn't say it in a nasty way, but he just brings it to my attention that he's absolutely rammed. And then I can go, well, actually, I think that needs to come out because this is more important. Or I can go, well, actually, it can wait probably for a month and we'll put it in there for you to deal with. So I think it's about finding your voice and speaking out. There's a very funny cartoon, which is kind of funny, but not funny, which says, you know, at last, here is your opportunity to shine. There's a major project of utmost importance and it's got all this, and you've got 15 minutes to complete it, you know? And if you take that on and you don't say 15 minutes is not enough time, then you're just stitching yourself up, right? Mm. So you need to be saying, well, you have two choices here. You can either have it in 15 minutes, in which case it's going to be rubbish and I don't want to put my name to it, or it's going to take me 2 days to do it properly. Which would you prefer? Because actually it's about managing them. I'm a great believer that you train people how to treat you. And if you keep saying yes to everything, they will just keep giving you stuff to do. But can you think of anybody else in the business who says yes to everything? Because I can't. And I don't think it makes you somebody who is amazing. I think it makes you a doormat.
Oh, the power of no, isn't it? That
Yeah.
needs to be in business. Absolutely. So the other question about becoming strategic was around, obviously executives want their assistants to easily represent them, as I'm sure you do, Matt, in certain situations, or even make decisions on your behalf. But how do you get your assistant to build up to that confidence where you see them as that trusted extension of you?
I think this is, are you familiar with Tuckman theory? The Tuckman theory.
Yes, but
Yeah,
perhaps
indeed.
maybe not so much.
Yes. So I think whenever you take on somebody new, you're going to start off in that forming quadrant, and you have to get to know each other a little bit, and you're quite polite to each other. And then quite quickly you move into storming. And some people's storming is gentle and some people's storming is horrible. And it's just like that clash, and it's trying to work out where the boundaries are, and both of you communicating with each other, but maybe you're not quite in sync yet. And sometimes when I do my training, I have assistants afterwards who go, my word, now I've realized it's a process. I've realized that I've been 5 years in storming, and all I have to do is to push out and get into the next quadrant, which is norming. And norming is where you work together really nicely, you understand each other, and you're supportive of each other. But where you really want to get is into the performing quadrant, which is the final one. And that's how I was talking earlier, where one of you breathes in and the other one breathes out, and you're like one person. So to me, you've got to make your way through that process. Of course, you know, you could be an assistant of 30 years standing, but if you get a new boss, it takes time to build trust and to build the communication and to understand how each other works. So don't worry if it's not there initially, you will get there. And if you're an executive, give your assistant things to do. Maybe take 3 things like I was explaining earlier and say, I'd like you to do these. I'm forever pushing Matt outside his comfort zone and getting him to do things he doesn't think he can do, because it just makes for him being a far better assistant. And if he's a better assistant, then in turn, I'm a better publisher. So it all makes sense all the way round.
Okay. So again, it was forming, then you moved to
storming,
norming, and then performing.
Norming and then performing, yes.
Okay, perfect. We'll definitely pull out some stuff on that theory for the guys and send that through. I think that's really, really useful. Okay. So I guess, Lucy, from what you've mentioned, I guess there's a lot of pressure nowadays for the assistant in order to become that strategic partner, to demonstrate their value, to train their executive, to improve their productivity, you know, train their executive to communicate better with them, and likewise also structure and learning capability. So what do assistants tell you globally in terms of how not to crack under all this pressure?
Oh, I think it's exactly what we just said. It's the power of no. You know, I think there are varying things actually. I think it is communicating well with your executive, because most executives think that things take far less time or cost far less money than they actually do. So you have to find your voice and you have to have conversations with them that explain exactly how it actually works. Secondly, you cut procrastination. Yes, because procrastination is something that absolutely kills assistants. You have just got to make sure that you're getting on and eating the frog, as they say, you know. Mark Twain has that wonderful quote that says, if you've got to eat a frog, do it first thing in the morning. And if you've got to eat 2 frogs, eat the biggest one first. In other words, if there's something you hate doing, get it done. There's an analogy that I use quite often, which is that if you have a jar and you have a pile of stones and a pile of sand, which do you put in first? Well, you put in the stones first, right? The things that, because then you can take the sand and you can fit it all around the stones. What are your stones as an assistant? Well, they're all the things that make your executive amazing. So the things you absolutely have to do, like board reports and briefing documents and maybe doing minutes, even though I know you hate them, you know, all the big stuff that you absolutely have to do. And then you can take the sand and you can put it in afterwards. And I think if you're putting those stones into your calendar and you're time boxing them, then your days will get taken over with sand, which is what happens so often to all of us, I think. Now, the other thing that I would say is that I think it's about delegating, because if you are somebody that thinks you're the only person who can do this job, you're making yourself indispensable. it probably means you're not going to get promoted. So you want to get other people to help with things. If you've got junior assistants, get them to do the more junior roles and start to build them up, because as they build up, you're going to build up your career as well. And this power of saying no, if you're somebody, you know, the other people in the office who come to you, the ones that you don't directly report to, the ones you're not responsible for, the ones that come and say, you know how lovely you are, is there any chance you could possibly play with this PowerPoint for me? No, because actually you're employed to look after your executives, not those people. And you know, they skip out of the office at 6 o'clock in the evening, you're still there at 8 doing their work, and it only adds to the stress. So there are nice ways to say no. You know, I would love to help you, but I'm absolutely snowed under until Thursday. So if you come back then, I'll do it. You know, because they only ever come to you when they've got an emergency. And so they'll go, oh, you're so lovely, but actually I'm going to go and find some other poor fool to do this for me. Or, you know, if you'd like to give me a greater lead time next time, I would love to help you. But actually I'm up to my eyes with John's board reports today. Yes, so you don't necessarily have to say no, although no is a complete sentence, and that's all right. You can just say no if you want to. It's a bit abrupt. But, you know, there are lots of nice ways to couch that, so it isn't seen as being aggressive in any sort of way.
Great. And I guess with hospitality industry, with COVID being hit quite disproportionately hard, I think, and maybe executives not seeing the value equation recently, I think a lot of executives have been either made redundant or have lost their jobs, it's fair to say. So if they're looking to kind of get back into that market and utilize what you've kind of told them about, you know, taking that mindset into a new world, how do they actually go about building their brand, whether it's using online or networking? What does brand building from a employers and employees perspective actually look like nowadays, and what should they be doing?
Oh gosh, okay, so the first thing that I would say to you is that 10 years ago we would say take your CV and make it stand out and put it on beautiful paper, and you know, these days most recruitment departments have got machines that will go through and search for certain words to see if you match what it is that they are looking for. So actually make sure that you're feeding back words in your cover letter and in your CV that reflect what they have asked for. Customize them. It's no good sending a beautiful looking CV for every job and expecting for that to be enough. It needs to be customized. The second thing that I will say is that networking is a wonderful thing. And I know that right now many of us can't get out there and network, but you can on social media. And there are so many amazing groups for assistants on social media and on Twitter. You know, just give you an example, our LinkedIn group now has 45,000 assistants worldwide chatting on it on a daily basis. There are 12,000 followers on Twitter. We've got about 18,000 assistants across our LinkedIn and across our Facebook group and page. And so just there, talking to people is amazing. And I know that some of the people who have lost their jobs, you feel like these people are friends, and everybody gathers round and gives them encouragement. And what's really great actually is that, especially on LinkedIn, so many of our network are going, okay, as soon as I get a role, I'm going to put it online and on LinkedIn, and I'm going to put hashtag jobs for assistants after it, because before the company advertises it, quite often they're out there on LinkedIn so that people in the network are able to pick them up and get onto it. So that's, just make yourself visible. Make sure that people are able to see who you are, and do post stuff. You know, I think there's a lot of nonsense written about networking online actually, and it's no different to networking in person. You sit and you listen, and when you feel you have something relevant and constructive to say, you do it, and it's as simple as that. So put your brand out there, talk about what you're absolutely passionate about, make sure your LinkedIn profile is up to date, because your LinkedIn profile, 94% of recruitment is now done via LinkedIn. So you want to make sure that that is all up to date and looking absolutely amazing, and customize your CV for each job you apply for.
Fantastic. So, Lucy, I guess let's put that to the test, because I personally am, as Pitman Training Kenya, we've got 2 companies that have reached out to us who are looking for executive assistants to hit that strategic business partner role. So to the attendees out there, you know, you've got me on LinkedIn. By all means, share with me your LinkedIn profile, and let's have a conversation, because, you know, there are people actively recruiting at the moment as well. And we'll send more details to you on our contact sheets after this. And final question, Lucy, which is around training. We had a lot of these as well. So is there a clear structured training plan out there that cuts through the noise on how you can develop yourself from that aspiring assistant up to that strategic business partner? And are there any sort of standard certifications for the profession that someone should be aiming for? Of course, Pitman Training and exec secretaries have had a long-standing relationship for a very long time. And Pitman have been in the industry training secretaries from over 180 years now. But where do you see sort of that training element and the certification? And are these things relevant for what employers are looking for right now? Or should it be more the softer stuff that we just spoke about?
I think it's a mixture of both, actually. I think there is so much tech out there that is, oh gosh, it's overwhelming. I mean, you just don't have time to get to it all, right? But tech skills, I think, are going to become more and more important. And for all the reasons that I talked about earlier, you've got to be faster and smarter and more efficient. And on the other side, the strategic skills and the softer skills, leadership skills, absolutely just as much important. And of course, there are certifications out there. There's some wonderful certifications out there. Lots and lots of amazing training programs as well. I know that you guys specialize mainly in the hard skills, don't you, Shakil?
Correct, yeah.
Yes, and you know, Pitman has the most wonderful reputation in all that stuff. But you know, you will see, if you're on social media, you will see so much stuff that is out there, so many amazing webinars and trainings and everything else. We actually have a system that we put in last year. It was a campaign that we ran over 10 days called Ask for Training. And I sent you the link for that, so you can get that out to the delegates if you like, because it's live and you can start it right from the beginning and go through it, and it's 10 minutes a day over 10 days. But what it does is it shows you how to go to your executive to ask for training, and it shows you how to research it. And in the middle, there's an amazing training needs analysis where we went and did a whole load of research from assistants as to the things that they actually do. I think it's got listed there almost every skill you might possibly ever need as an assistant. And you're able to mark off on there how you feel you score out of 5, and you get your executive to do exactly the same exercise. So that when you sit down in your appraisal or your personal development meeting, in order to talk about what you're going to do for the next year, you can see the skills gaps and you can agree between you what training you might need for the next year. But it's great, it's got all sorts of things in there. It's got templates as to how you put in a request for training and a business case so that you look really professional. But over the 10 days, it builds up from right at the beginning to a point where actually you've got that training needs analysis and the way to go ask for it. So I would suggest that when Shakil sends that out, you go and start that program, because it's fun, but it's really useful too.
Oh, Lucy, thanks for sharing that. We've just put it on the chat as well, so the link is in there, guys. So feel free to go in. We've had a look through it yesterday. It is fantastic in terms of a free resource. And as Lucy said, completely allows you to take from scratch your whole training aspiration, and also understand how to ask for that funding in return to develop your skill sets. And ultimately, you know, use that powerful message that Lucy shared in terms of how to demonstrate your value, and also use that same equation for investment in your training. So fantastic, Lucy. That's the sort of 10 questions we had from all the various multiple amazing questions we received. I guess we'll now just open up for a few minutes for any live questions that want to come through from the guys. So feel free to ask us, drop us any questions. Of course, if we can't get through them, we will share them with Lucy, and I'm sure she'll be able to give us her response on those that we can share with you. But let's pick up one question here. When executives headhunt for an executive assistant, do they look for fit or function?
I think it depends on the company, actually, and it depends on the executive and what their personality is like. I would suggest that you always interview with the executive you're going to work for, as well as with HR. I don't understand ever why an executive would not want to meet the assistant that they're looking to hire. It depends, you know. I feel that sometimes assistants don't have to like their executive in order for it to work. It's a job of work. And if you're looking at yourself as a tool that gets them from A to B to do the things that they need to do, then wonderful. I think especially because this is a profession which is 98% women, we're brought up as women to think that if you behave nicely, things will be fair. And quite often in business, that isn't the case. And therefore we take things horribly personally if the executive isn't nice to us. And I don't mean evil to us now. What I mean is they're just not overly friendly. But this is business. And actually, what they are really after is what you're able to do for them and for the business. So yes, it's nice if they're nice and you get on well, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary for it to be so. And I think businesses would usually hire firstly for skills and secondly for fit.
Mm-hmm. And another interesting question we received is if an executive assistant is looking to, I guess, come out of that field or extend their skill set beyond what we've discussed, what are some of the other new skill sets that you now see coming through? I mean, you talked about project management being one, which I think a lot of EAs currently are wearing hats off, but any other trends that you're seeing coming through for the future that maybe in order to develop that strategic relationship, they need to have that additional string to their bow?
I would go look again at the Future of Work report from the World Economic Forum, because there it says the skills that are going downhill and the skills that are coming up. Because obviously with AI coming in, there are going to be things that are going out the window. And actually, most of the stuff that is fact-based isn't going to be needed anymore because we just ask Siri or Google, don't we? So the skills that are really coming up are things like critical thinking and emotional intelligence and complex problem solving and coding, actually, funny enough. And coding apparently is going to be as uniform for all of us as using the internet. And at the moment, they're teaching kids in primary school here in the UK how to do coding. So that's another one that maybe you should go and take a look at. But I think apart from that, it's really getting to grips with your business. It's really starting to understand what each of the departments do. And I think quite often assistants are in a position whereby they concentrate on where things are coming from and where they're going to, rather than looking at the big picture. And what you need to do is to stand back and not just look at that and start looking at the whole thing and thinking, all right, so where do I fit into that and where can I add value?
Okay, fantastic. So just if there's any questions, feel free to just drop in as we discuss, but if there's any other questions that come through, you might pick them up in the next few minutes before we close. But Lucy, based on that segue on new skill sets, you kindly have well, you first of all have a very special project brewing imminently, which I know you're crazy busy on planning at the moment. And you've kindly also extended a fantastic opportunity for our Africa region to participate in. Could you just tell us a little bit more about that, if that's okay?
Oh, I would love to. Thank you so much. So we did our first online conference in June, and it was a phenomenal success. And actually, we were several people suggested we should enter it for awards because it was such an amazing event. But that's by the by. We had great feedback from that. We obviously sent out feedback forms. But what was wanted next was an event that focused on tech, and that's because of the reasons that I explained a moment ago. All the assistants were saying to us, we're really fearful. We're fearful that our executive is going to catch us out and that we don't know what we need to know. And also we don't know what we don't need to know. And who has time to sit there and to do demo after demo for new projects? And I totally understand that, because for me, there are things like, for example, Asana and Trello and Canva and things that I hear kind of bandied about, which I've gone and looked at, kind of, Slack is another one. And I keep thinking I must go and look at that because they're telling me it's going to increase my productivity by miles. Do I ever have time to do it? No. And so the assistants who have got this huge imposter syndrome around tech are saying, could you just do something for us where we've got a one-stop shop? So that's what we're doing. Next week on Wednesday and Thursday, we have 2 days. It's 48 hours of personal development all around tech. So it's 2 days where you're going to learn all the things that you need to know. We're going to introduce you to some amazing speakers, some of you will already know because they are global superstars in this marketplace. People like Vicky Sokol-Evans, who is the lady that trained Bill Gates's team of VAs how to use Microsoft properly. She was a stand-up comedian, so she's really funny as well. I don't know quite how you make Excel funny, but she does. Or Melissa Esquivel, who is just the queen of Excel, but she is doing a session on that and on Power Query, but she's also doing a session which she is moderating between Neil Malik, who is a global expert on Microsoft, and Simon McGaskill, who is a global expert on Google, and that's going to be a face-off between the two. But we do have sessions on Trello and on Canva and on Asana and on Notion and on well-being, digital well-being, and all sorts of things that maybe you would never have looked at before, like how to use Adobe or how to do a podcast, and lots of stuff on social media. It's just going to be a really great couple of days, and we're up to just over 800 attendees so far, and we'd love to host you if you wanted to come. So as Shaquille said, we've put together a really special offer for the Africa region so that you're able to attend.
Absolutely, and I think it's the world's first technology conference for the administrative profession. I mean, that's a big first, and as you said, a huge amount of credible speakers and relevant tools at the moment. As you know, as you spoke about that, people are banding about and no one knows how to use them, why they're beneficial to them. And I think the key thing is it's on the 23rd and the 24th of September. But it's also available on demand, right, for 2 weeks after. So you can register. If for whatever reason you can't make it, you can still access all the 48 hours of continuous learning for 2 weeks. So we're just going to put in a link in the chat, which includes a booking form, where if you are interested, we will obviously send you through more information on the post-webinar email. But if you are interested to sign up, it's exclusively through Pitman Training Kenya for African attendees at an incredible 60% off, which is just insane value, I think, for what you're getting. So by all means, guys, if you want to update on your tech skills, I think this will be a fantastic opportunity. I think I'm definitely joining as well, because I need to learn a lot. Well, on that note, we have had a few questions in, but we've just run out of time. So Lucy, I just want to take a couple of minutes to thank you so much for all the great insight and tips and hints that you've provided our attendees today. I'm sure our Kenyan audiences specifically have benefited significantly from getting your sort of global viewpoint and global perspectives. We look forward very much to seeing this 6 years of hard work come to fruition and give clarity to the role, so we can then easily plan and train and give MDs the sort of clarity of where they should be pitching and where they should be recruiting. So it's fair to say this is a solid profession. It's evolving for the future. And, there is a lot of value, particularly to drive in commercial perspective, but also job satisfaction perspective, because it expects you to now maintain your performance at higher levels than any other, people within the organization, and become that extension of that C-suite. So for me, I think as Pitman, we're very passionate about driving it. And if you guys are interested in any training support, of course, that, code you on hard skills and complement that with the softer elements, which Lucy kind of kindly is providing as well. I think you've got, you can come to us and we can jointly pull together sort of your training plan. By all means, refer to that Ask for Training link that we sent you through, because you can send that through directly to us at kenya@pitmantraining.net once you filled it in. And we can then have a discussion together with execs and pull together the correct training plan for you, depending on what your ambitions are. But Lucy, any final remarks from yourself?
All I would say is that I think this COVID period of time is a real opportunity for you. There are some things that assistants have wanted to be able to jump into and get done for a very long time, but haven't ever been given the opportunity. But if you do go and work out how you can add value, and you take on the tasks and you upskill yourself, your executive and yourself will never look back, because actually they will see what you bring to the table. They will love you forever if you are giving them back their time at the moment. So grab the opportunity with both hands and go do it, because the strategic business partnership is very definitely the future for the assistant.
Fantastic. And I'll just ask you to leave on one small question that has come in, which I don't want to leave. So someone has asked, now, can an executive move from an executive role to the C-suite? Yes or no?
Yes, I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen. But you just have to have the drive, the determination to get there. I would say, Shaquille, is that obviously, I'll give you an example actually. Anne Hyatt, who was the chief of staff at Google, who created the role for herself. I mean, she has a PhD from Berkeley, and she is fluent in Swedish, and actually now she lives here with me in Spain. But that's a whole other story. But Anne Hyatt got from being she was originally the EA to Jeff Bezos, then she was the EA to Marissa Mayer, then she was EA to Eric Schmidt at Google, but created the role of chief of staff, where she was actually there working, sitting on the board for herself, because she's a smart cookie and she drove herself to get there.
Fantastic. That's a very powerful note to end the session on. So Lucy, thank you so much. Thank you to all the attendees. Great to see majority of you have stayed until the end, so fantastic. And do urge you to use their free resource and ask for training, which we'll send through on email as well. And of course, the booking form for Exec Secretary Tech Conference, which is on the 23rd and 24th of September at 60% off, exclusively through Pitman, is available for you guys to join. So Asante Sana, thank you, Lucy. All the best. Wish you all the best with tech as well. Take care.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. It's been really wonderful to spend time with you.
Fantastic. Asante Sana, thank you. Bye-bye.